So I'm gonna be really real with you all. It's been a full year since I decided to start my art business, and I haven't actually made any money. So at this point, I'm ready to level up and start actually turning my art business into a real career. And I know that the first step is to just buckle down and actually make a plan for how I'm gonna do that. So no more procrastinating, let's jump right into it. If this is our first time meeting, hello, welcome. My name is Sarah, and I'm a watercolor artist and a surface pattern designer to be. And I've spent the last year or so developing my creative practice while working full time. As I said at the beginning, I'm at the tail end of about a year since I decided I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna start an art business, and I've made $0. Actually, when you account for things like the tools, supplies, and resources that I've invested in, I've actually lost a fair amount of money on this business. Now, to be honest, I do want to say that this was largely intentional because I really viewed this first year as kind of training grounds for my business. I had so much to learn over the past year, and I really did learn a lot, ranging from things like starting the process of building an audience online to really developing my art skills. To be honest, I'm pretty new in the art world and I have so much to learn still. So it's been a lot of this kind of foundation building over the past year. But now I'm really at a point where I'm ready to start taking this thing a lot more seriously. So I really wanted to take you along with me as I figure out how to develop this business from essentially non-existent to something that can actually support my ideal lifestyle. So I've broken this planning process into multiple different parts. So let's get started, and we'll start at the very beginning. I think a crucial part of developing any plan is starting by defining where you are and then where you want to be. Right now, like I said, I'm making a grand total of $0 for my business, and there's no shame in that. That's where most people start. But it does mean that I'm building this truly from the ground up. So the primary financial goal that I'm going to be focusing on in today's video is going to be to replace my current full-time salary. So I work as an environmental consultant. I know it has nothing to do with art, but in that position, I make about $75,000 per year. So if you break that down by month, that's about $6,250 per month that I currently make in my full-time position. So to be honest, I know this is gonna sound kind of crazy, but I actually have a lot of big goals of expanding my business income well beyond that $75,000 mark, which you're probably like, girl, you just told us you're making $0. Chill out for a second. Which is valid, I acknowledge that. But I really do have a lot of big dreams related to this business. But I think from the position where I'm sitting right now, at the very beginning, I think once you project that far out, there starts to be a lot of uncertainty with like where income is gonna be coming from, what that's really gonna be looking like at that stage. So for this initial planning phase, I'm really gonna be focusing on that journey of $0 to $75,000. For me personally, I think it's gonna be a lot more actionable to focus on this from a monthly income basis. So like I said, to replace my current income, that's gonna be $6,250 per month. So I also wanted to put some kind of realistic time container around my goals. Since I'm just starting out and I'm doing this while I'm also working a full-time job, I do want to be really realistic about this timeline. So I'm giving myself a goal of reaching this $75,000 or $6,250 per month in a 2-year time frame. Now, before you leave me, I know that sounds like a long time, but hear me out. I really want to be building this business in a sustainable way and an intentional way. And I'm really trying to avoid the burnout that I feel like comes so often when people just hustle so hard, you know? So to me, 2 years feels like a very achievable and realistic timeline. Okay, so now that I've defined where I am and where I want to be financially, it's time to take a closer look at the goals within every facet of my business and how I'm going to use them to help me reach these financial goals. I have tons of smaller, mostly non-financial goals that are going to help me achieve that financial goal of $6,250 per month. I've spent a year just letting these ideas kind of float around in my head, so I definitely feel like I'm at the point where I'm ready to turn them into something more concrete. So here we go. When I'm developing a big plan like this that has a lot of different moving parts, I actually find it really helpful to start in an analog format. Eventually, I'm going to bring everything into a system like Notion to help me organize my thoughts a little bit more and have them in a place where they're easily accessible going forward. But to get started, I find it actually so helpful to really just pull out pen and paper and let let the ideas flow. Okay, so here's what I did. I got rid of all distractions and I set a timer for 15 minutes and I started writing down every little goal that popped in my mind. I like doing this on individual little pieces of paper because this is going to allow me to move them around as I see fit and sort them in a way that makes sense to me. So if you do an exercise like this, no matter whether you're at the very beginning like me or you're further along in your journey, if you need to hear this, I just want to say it's okay if you write down some goals that feel like a little bit ridiculous. Like, for example, I currently have something like 612 subscribers on YouTube, and I wrote down hitting 30,000 subscribers, which, yes, that sounds a little bit ridiculous, right? That being said, I really do feel like there's something kind of magical about putting that intention out into the world, you know? Obviously, I'm nowhere close to that 30,000 mark, but oh, Alicia's here. We've been joined by sweet Alicia, my pirate kitty. If you hear any like snorts or Darth Vader breathing in any of my videos, I can guarantee it's this one, given the fact that she does only have one sinus. So to be honest, I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but like sometimes I think about the fact that it already really truly does feel magical that there are 612 of you here. Like sometimes I imagine myself in a room with 612 people who are all there because they care what I have to say. And like, that's like, I'm sorry, I don't know if that sounds really cheesy, but like it actually kind of blows my mind to think about that. So anyway, if you're here, if you're one of the 612, thank you. I really, really appreciate you being here. Okay, so I think it's a huge win to have my goals out of my head and onto paper. You can see there's a really wide range of goals I have here. There are some really small things like literally clicking the publish button on my website, which has been on my to-do list for months, actually months. But there's also some really massive goals, at least they seem really massive to me, like pitching my artwork to 100 companies. That, from my perspective today where I am, that seems wild to me to have pitched my artwork to 100 companies. Okay, so the next step that I wanted to do was organize them into some kind of logical flow. So for some of these, that's more straightforward than others. Like, for example, I wrote down pitch to 10 companies and then pitch to 100 companies. Obviously, 10 will come first. But there are some other goals that I really just kind of sorted based on the vibes to get a general big picture overview of how the flow across these different goals might actually go. So now that I have my goals out of my brain and written down, the next logical question is, how do I actually go about reaching those goals? Okay, so now that I have a sense for the rough kind of order of operations that I think I might take, I basically sifted through all of these goals to identify the pieces that I think will contribute to my revenue. So basically, these are the things that are gonna eventually become my various revenue streams. In doing this exercise, I basically identified 4 main categories. There's my art category, and there's a few different things that will fit inside this. That's things like art licensing, commissions, and any freelance work that I end up doing. Then there's my YouTube category. This also kind of includes Instagram a little bit, but I'm definitely not focused on Instagram. I'm more drawn to the YouTube thing. Then I have a category for digital products. So this could include a wide range of things, ranging from like something small, like a download or an ebook or something like that, all the way up to something like an online course, for example. And then I have an other category that just kind of catches anything else that doesn't fit into those 3 primary categories. Now, something I'll also note is that I did include some subsections for a few of these various revenue streams. Like, for example, rather than just saying YouTube, I can say something like money from YouTube AdSense, and then money from YouTube sponsors, for example. Basically, at this point was when I was ready to bring all of this into Notion. So let's jump over to my computer and I can walk you through how I did that. Welcome to my kitchen table. This is honestly where I do most of my Pepo Studios work, so I figured this is a good place to walk you through my Notion setup. Now, if you want to follow along with me, I put a link in the description where you can download this Notion template so you can fill it in with all of your own goals and dreams and financial roadmaps. So that's there if you want it. But if you aren't a Notion user, you can certainly use your favorite good old spreadsheet application like Google Sheets or Excel or, you know, whatever, Google Doc, or you can write it down in your journal, whatever floats your boat. So I'm gonna get you set up here and then we'll walk through this template that I put together. Okay, so let me walk you through this template that I have set up here. So at the top of the page, I've got my big financial goal here. This is just the way that I'm gonna organize it. My vision is to have multiple of these, you know, as I progress throughout my business and replicate this kind of method. And so I can easily kind of go back and forth between them, you know? So if we just scroll down, I first took those ideas that I wrote down on those pieces of paper and I sorted them into their various categories here. And so this isn't necessarily exhaustive, but this is a good idea of like the kinds of goals that, you know, I wrote down. And like I said before, I sorted these into their various categories. This I should probably truly just call art because it's gonna include like licensing, commissions. Wow, I couldn't spell any of those words. You ever type something like in front of the classroom and you just like can't spell anything? I think that's what just happened. Okay, so if we scroll down past the idea dump here, basically what I've done is I've broken my timeline into multiple different phases. So for the most part, these are kind of 6-month phases. And I'll break these down even further as I get into like monthly planning and weekly planning, for example. But this is a big picture look at what my plan is gonna be. And like I said, at the top of this video, my goal is to achieve this financial goal within 2 years. So this ends a little bit longer than 2 years. It'll be the end of 2025 that I have in these phases. But before I get into like the goals that are within each of these phases, I actually want to jump forward to this part right here. So maybe I'm kind of nerdy about this, but this is like the most exciting part to me. And that's laying out a financial roadmap for me to actually achieve my financial goal. So the reason I want to start here is because at least the way I see it is if I define a financial roadmap, basically like how much money I think I could make between each of these various income streams, then I can use this to sort out my goals into those different phases to figure out basically what I need to be doing in order to achieve that financial goal. Okay, so let me orient you a little bit to the way that I've set up this mini little database. So each of my rows here, oops, that's the wrong way to spell AdSense. This is going great. But basically each of these rows here represent a different potential revenue stream. I'm not tying myself to this. This is certainly non-exhaustive and it's something I can add to or delete and change as I move forward. But this is a good framework to get started. I have these categories just to sort into the different revenue stream categories that I defined earlier. And then I made a column for each phase of my plan. So like I said, those are those kind of 6-month chunks, starting with where I am right now, which basically takes us through the end of 2023. So if you're following along and you're doing this for yourself, this is how I would recommend that you start. Start here in phase 1. Now for me, like I said, this was pretty easy because it's basically $0. I'm basically not making anything at this stage. You'll see I did put $100 for commissions because I've been working on a few pet portraits here and there, and those typically bring me in around $100. And so it's like nothing super intense, nothing like very strict or anything like that. But that's about what I can expect in this phase. Now, what I would recommend is that you don't actually go right to phase 2 from that. I'd actually recommend that you start by filling out phase 1 and then jump all the way to phase 5. I know that feels kind of wild, but basically, hear me out. We know we have our monthly goal. So for me, my monthly goal was $6,250 in order to replace my current full-time income. So basically, I saw these buckets that are the different revenue streams that I am hoping to build in my business. And I basically said, okay, how do I divide $6,250 across these various revenue streams? So for example, I thought about this and I said, okay, maybe by that point, almost 2 years from now, I could be realistically making $1,500 from YouTube AdSense. Maybe I'm crazy and maybe that's like very unrealistic, but maybe it's super achievable. So I wrote it down, I put that intention into the world, and then I just went down the list. I have the same advice if you're doing this as I did when you're writing down those goals on the little pieces of paper. Some of these are gonna feel kind of ridiculous, especially when you're starting from zero, from making $0. Like I see this $2,000 under courses, and At first, you're gonna hear the little imposter syndrome voice being like, who are you to think that there are people out there in the world who are gonna pay their hard-earned money to like listen to you talk, right? To like hear what you have to say, right? That's just one part of me. But there's this other part of me that sees these numbers written out like this and broken down the way they are, that really makes me feel like, yes, girl, you can do this, right? Like the idea of replacing my full-time income seems really difficult, right? It seems kind of like pie in the sky. But when I break it down like this and into these various revenue streams, it seems a lot more attainable to me. So I won't say there's like a perfect way to divide this across the various revenue streams if you're doing this yourself. But this is really, for me, like my kind of ideal split, how I would want to be doing this. So you can see a lot of the money would be coming from the YouTube side of things. I really love making YouTube videos. I'm very drawn to video content, so like this is something I just really want to do. But then some of it is also going to come from licensing. You can see I brought my commission income way down from where it used to be. That's kind of my goal, is to use commissions as a income source in the earlier phases and then drop commissions as time goes on. Some things like art licensing, I really see art licensing as a long game, okay? So at this stage of the game, it's not making up a huge part of my income the way I've projected it out, but I think throughout all of this, I'm gonna be putting in a lot of time to developing and kind of building up that income stream. So basically, once you fill out phase 1 and phase 5, then you can go through and fill out each of these other individual phases, and you can see this slow, steady growth over time. So if you look at the bottom here, you can see my average monthly income that I'm expecting to take in during each of these phases. So you can see, I mean, this is obviously not a get rich quick scheme, right? This is gonna take me a long time to build up a full-time income. But the way I see it is that it is a sustainable approach. This is slow, steady growth that I'm projecting for myself here. And that's exactly how I want it to be. Okay, so now that I laid out this financial roadmap for myself, the final piece here is really to go back to this initial idea dump that we had and sort all of these different pieces into the various phases. And I'm using that financial roadmap as a guidepost for that. So for example, with phase 1, I'm gonna put all my foundation building things into that, like publishing my website and coming up with an email newsletter template and stuff like that. But then when we get into phase 2, we can start to see, okay, areas where I want to be growing a little bit. I wanna have some art licensing income in phase 2. So that's where I'm gonna have things like pitching my portfolio and getting my first licensing contract. So one thing that I want to say here too is that not all of my goals that I've set out for myself are financial goals, and that's a good thing. Like there are a lot of goals that I wrote down here that are more related to things like developing my art skills, or like nurturing and building my audience, or maybe even most importantly, just cultivating this slow-paced, sustainable lifestyle that I'm trying to build. And just because these goals aren't strictly financial doesn't mean that they don't deserve a place in this timeline. I 100% am going to be writing down these goals here. So it would take me a really long time to walk you through each one of these toggles and like which goal I put into which subcategory in each phase and things like that. And that's not really the point of this video, right? But basically at the end of doing this whole exercise, I now have a timeline laid out by these 6-ish month chunks where I know exactly what goals I'm working towards. And so basically now at this point, I can take these 6-month goals and then use them to guide my monthly goals as I write those out, or my weekly goals as I start my week. You know, like I suggested earlier, even if this goes totally off the rails and maybe I never open this Notion template again, or maybe immediately something else comes up that I hadn't projected and this totally shifts the trajectory that I have laid out here, I think just the act of getting those goals out of your brain and onto paper is a massive, massive first step into turning them into something real. And that's basically it. So that's the plan that I've come up with to take me from $0 to $75,000. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you can appreciate how taking these really big goals and breaking them down into little steps makes them seem so much more attainable. So if you're curious to see if I actually achieve all these goals that I set out to do, and if you enjoy seeing more of this kind of behind the scenes creative business content, I welcome you to subscribe to my channel, because I'm certainly going to be sharing a lot more of this type of content because it's what I love to watch and what I love to make as well. You can also follow me on Instagram to see more of the day-to-day look at kind of how I go about running my business or whatever paintings I'm working on at the moment. You're also guaranteed to see lots of cat content on my Instagram because obviously. If you enjoyed this video, I bet you'll enjoy this series that I have on my channel called Big Goals, Little Steps, which are basically these regular accountability check-ins where I walk through all of the little steps that I'm taking to reach some of the big goals that I've set out to do. So in this series, I talk about all kinds of things like building my website and choosing which email service provider I'm gonna end up using. So again, if you're into that kind of behind the scenes business content, I'm sure you'll find some kind of value from these videos as well. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you very soon for the next one. Bye everyone.